our final call tonight didn't have a name or a location, but they do have a voice, and it sounds like this.
Hey, yeah, thank you for taking my call. Little background, I paid a sex worker $400 for a hand job. It was nice, but I felt reduced to a dick and some money, and I wondered what it would be like to offer a friend $400 for a hand job, because, I'd rather give it to a friend than a stranger. My questions are, what is it about money that makes this messy? And would there be a way of asking a friend without it coming off as creepy? And finally, is this just a horrible idea, never to be mixed with friendship? So thanks for considering my question.
So I hear there's someone who wrote a book about that recently, about the idea of how friendship and sex can go together.
Is that what you've heard?
But was there money involved? That's the bigger question.
Yeah, is the money
what
is the
about
money
the
question?
money? And my question is, I feel like there are a lot of unanswered questions within those questions, such as, it sounds like this person is wanting a friends with benefits situation, but to pay them. And I wonder if the money is to establish very, very clear boundaries, no strings attached whatsoever. This is transactional. But without that information, it's hard to say. I think there are a lot of different potential answers. I'm really excited to hear what everyone has to say, because I think there are so many nuances here.
I think my first thought after hearing those questions was, one, money doesn't have to make it messy, but we have a lot of emotional and ingrained and taught ideas about money and sexuality that probably are making part of that messy for that particular person. But I don't think it's always messy. And the second thing I want to say is, the second question about offering your friend $400 to give you a blowjob would greatly depend on your friendship. Because if you have a platonic friend that you don't know that well and you offer them money for sex, yeah, that's a never no-go, not okay. That's just problematic and scary and can put your friend in a very, very intimidating position. But if you have a friend where you're open sexually and you have conversations about those things and you're interested, it's possible. Whether money needs to exchange or not is a separate question, but it definitely needs to consider the context of your existing relationship.
Yeah, and I think that, again, like Reba, I have more questions than answers, really, because I do feel like there's a lot missing from this call. I think that, I was surprised by this caller's kind of potential solution, because in my mind, I thought, oh, well, just ask for something different from a different sex worker, right? Like, you might, when you said it felt you were reduced to a dick and money, well, then you might have asked for the wrong thing, right? You might have wanted more intimacy. You might have wanted more of a girlfriend experience or a boyfriend experience. You might have wanted something that the sex worker didn't know to give you. So I think it can be that maybe this is a great sex work transaction, and to keep it within sex work, but be more specific about what you're looking for. You want you want kissing, you want to feel loved, you want to feel nurtured and given a hand job. There are so many different ways to approach transactional sex than just like this side soulless and then friends are where you get appreciation and love. That's not how it has to work. So I think that my approach would be to maybe encourage this caller to try a little bit, being a bit more specific, and then also mining this caller's desires about what exactly did he or this person want that they didn't get, and how can they try and be more specific about those asks.
Yeah, I too was going to bring up the notion of GFE or BFE, girlfriend experience or boyfriend experience, if you're looking for that in searches, right? That's the shorthand. Because I know a number of, like, back when I was a sex worker, I did that sort of work, and like I had a gentleman who was a Lutheran minister that what he was looking for was someone who could argue theology with him for 2 hours and then give him a blowjob. I'm like, I'm in. Let's go. Seattle's best coffee. We're going to argue this stuff
right
over latte. It's like, it was great. He was a fantastic reoccurring client. Like, he was just wonderful. But that's what he was looking for. And he had a lot of false starts finding people, because it was a similar kind of thing. He's like, I thought I was just looking for this, but it turns out he couldn't really get to the emotional point of it unless his brain was turned on.
Mm-hmm.
Right? He needed that intellectual eroticism of the challenge of it, right? Mm-hmm. And so I agree that it would look at that. And when it comes to friends and money, I think it depends on where your stories around money are, to examine your ones and your friends' ones before going into that space that a lot of folks in North America have. Camille, as you said, some trickiness around that, right? Like, there's some stuff there. So yeah, I'm fascinated by the question, and I kind of just want to pick his brain and be like, and
yeah. And to kind of piggyback off of that, Lee, like, there's also so much sex work stigma in this culture that if you were to approach a friend and offer them money for sex, you might not only encounter challenges to your friendship, but you might have them encounter a lot of their sex work phobia, and they might be insulted to be assumed to be a sex worker or to assume that they would be willing to do sex work. And I'm not saying that that's necessarily a healthy reaction, but it is a reaction that you might court. And so I think that is maybe a reason why it would not necessarily be the best idea to approach with that, because you might be challenging some really difficult stereotypes too.
Unless your friend's a sex worker, in which case.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. Like, if you have, maybe try and find some more sex worker friends.
Right. Yeah. That was my thought too. We don't know where this caller was calling in from, but maybe this person has friends who are sex workers already and just doesn't know it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Hopefully this person is tuned in tonight and is picking up some decent information. I know that it can be messy when money gets involved. It makes me think. I always try to think of corollaries again, like outside of sexuality. Like, if I were to offer my friend $100 to bake me some of those cookies that I love every time they bake. Mm-hmm. Is that messy, or is it the sex that makes it messy? Or is it, Allison, like you brought up, the sex worker stigma? Like, I can't imagine a friend saying, like, do you think I'm a professional baker? Like, there's no bristling at that. There's no bristling at that, the way that there's stigma with sex workers. So that almost feels like it brings us full circle around to sexual citizenship and empathy and awareness, and just erasing those stigmas and taboos. I wonder what happens to the money question then.
Well, there's more than just sexual stigmas that are involved with the money question. We do live in an extremely capitalist society. And that has a big effect on how people react to, think about, and feel about money. So.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I hadn't even considered that aspect of the question, that money adds an entire power dynamic depending on your personal relationship and your friend's personal relationship with money.
Or access to it, right? If for you, $400 isn't a thing, and the other person is trying to make enough, coin to pay rent, there is a potentially profound power imbalance there. That's, are you aware of your privilege in those kinds of cases? Though I will say, when Reba brought the idea that it can also create, firm lines. When I started my medical gender transition, so I was going under hormones, et cetera, my body was actively changing. I had a friend who was a sex worker and said, hey, what are your thoughts on me hiring you for an evening of a session? Because you know my body, you know me, you know my gender story, you know this path that I've been on, and I'm trying to find out what my body wants now that my body has been changing. What do you think? And she thought of it, like, she had to take a little time to think about it, because we'd had this up to that point, platonic friendship. And we had to figure out what that was going to look like. And for us, it was, we're going to do this session and then consciously set a date sometime in the next 2 weeks to hang out in a way that was non-sexual, to make sure we could, but it was rolling the dice in our case. We weren't sure, but we were both experiencing having intense and complex sexual conversations. So do you have that skill set too?
Mm-hmm.
Do you have the ability to have those conversations?